We're going to continue reading the rest of chapter 11 of A Day of Rest. Remember, the boys had been found in the mine by some bootleggers. That's possible, Ed agreed. Doug McTay lives on the top of the mountain. His house would be even closer than Charles. I know where Doug McTay lives without you telling me, Slim replied crossly. Okay, this is Doug McTay's boy. He then pointed at Jim. Who's that? Jim refused to answer. He did not know what the men would do, but he didn't want his mother to be approached by these men. Unlike Bert's dad, she had no relatives in the area to protect her from annoyance. He's my brother, Bert said hurriedly. He too didn't want these men bothering Mrs. Weaver. Let the men go to his dad. His dad would take care of both boys. I thought Doug McTay only had a boy and a girl. Slim looked at Ed. He could have a dozen boys for all I know. Ed shook his head. I have seen Doug McTay only twice in the months I have been here, and that was at his store. That boy doesn't look a bit like Doug. Slim still objected to the identification. This boy has white hair. I have never heard of a McTay that didn't have that dark red hair. What about it, Rob? Do you know him? Rob shrugged his shoulders. I have never seen either boy to know him. The younger one looks like Doug, but the other one could look like his mother. I don't remember what she looked like. It doesn't matter who the boy is, Ed broke in. The thing is, we've got two boys here. What are we going to do with them? First, we need to know why they are here, Slim answered. Okay, Doug McTay's boys, Ed asked as he gave Jim a hard shake. Why are you here? Just looking around, Bert suggested timidly after Jim refused to answer. Does anyone know you are down here? Slim demanded. No, Bert replied, his eyes shifting from the man to a point up the side of the mountain. That boy's telling lies, Slim stated. He's got all the signs. Just wait. I'll teach him to tell the truth. Still holding Bert firmly with his left hand, Slim unfastened his belt with his right and jerked it out of the loops. I'm going to give you the whipping of your life, he said as he held the belt up, if you don't look me straight in the eye and tell me who knows you are down here. That's not necessary, Slim, Ed objected. It doesn't matter whether he's telling the truth or not. The important thing is that you've been found out. You've got to get the jugs out of the mine and the still dismantled before the boys get home. I ain't letting them go so soon, Slim objected. I'm going to hold them till we get the jugs home and then come back and get our equipment. Let the boys go, Rob argued. They haven't heard anything, and by the time they get home, we'll be gone. If they don't go home, they will be missed, and someone will come looking for them. Rob's right, Ed said hurriedly. Let the boys go. We don't have time for games, and we'd better get away from here fast. Slim lowered his belt as Ed spoke, but he shook his head determinedly. No, if they go home, they'll tell their pa. Since we can't take everything in one trip, we would either lose the still or the whiskey. We can fill the jugs and hide them down the road a piece, then come back and get the still, Rob suggested. We don't have time to do any hiding. We promised to make deliveries on the way home of both wood and whiskey, Slim said flatly, and we won't have time to come back tonight and clear out the still. Then abandon the still, Rob yelled. Better to lose it than to have a run-in with the McTay clan. I don't think we have to worry about that, Ed said, still holding tight to Jim. Doug McTay won't want trouble any more than we do. Remember, one of the McTays is the sheriff, Slim warned. There's other kinds of trouble than just a fight with the McTay clan. No, we'll take the boys along to make sure he doesn't hear about the still until after there is no evidence. What does it matter if the sheriff finds out about the still? Rob said. There's nothing the sheriff can do unless he catches you here. But take those boys, and that's kidnapping. Not only will Doug McTay never forgive you, but the sheriff will have grounds to act. If you take the boys, what are you going to do with them? We'll take them home with us, get a good night's sleep, and come back tomorrow for the equipment, Slim answered. Then tomorrow night, we'll take the boys over on the other side of Shale Mountain and let them go. They should make it home in a day or two. And then what happens when they get home? Oh, they'll tell Doug that they were kidnapped, Slim laughed, but he won't believe them. He'll just think the boys are making up a big tale to account for laying out like that. He might not believe them at first, Ed argued, but he'll check the mind out, just in case, and then he'll believe them. How's he going to check? He'll come down here, and there's no way you're going to hide the fact we've been down here. So what? Slim shrugged. The still will be gone by then. So he sees the cut lumber. He gave Rob permission to cut down the dead trees. If we're going to take them, let's get at it, Ed spoke as he pushed Jim towards the wagon. We won't worry about Doug. He ain't a bit like Al. He won't want trouble any more than we do. You don't know Doug McTay. Rob shook his head in frustration. He may be mild-mannered, but Doug will not forget it if you take his boys. He will get back at you in some way. Probably not with a gun, as Al would. But you can be sure, as you're standing there, he will do something. We'll worry about that when the time comes, Slim replied as he pushed Bert over to Ed to hold while he put his belt through the loops of his pants. You'd better not let anything happen to those boys, Rob warned. Nothing is going to happen to those boys, Ed said soothingly. If anything does, Rob continued, I hope I'm not in the county to see what happens to you. I'll see nothing happens to the boys, Ed broke in hurriedly to stop Rob from repeating his arguments. Hypnotized by the quarreling, Susan forgot that she also was in danger, and without thinking raised higher and higher until she was standing upright, gazing in horror at the men holding Bert and Jim. Only when she saw Bert frowning at her and shaking his head did she realize what she was doing and kneeled down. Slim reached into the wagon and picked up 2 short ropes, one of which he handed to Ed. He tied Bert's hands together as Ed tied Jim's. Well, Rob, you were anxious to leave. Get to work and clear a place for us to put them, Slim demanded. Rob backed away. No, I won't help you. I said that I would come along today and help you deliver the wood because Ma needed wood also. I was going to look the other way while you deliver the whiskey, but I won't help you kidnap people. You're no use to us then, Slim declared brutally. You might as well go home. Rob didn't wait. He struck off down through the valley toward the Willow Creek Road. He'll tell his Ma, Ed declared. No, he won't. He won't want her to know anything about it. He knows what will happen to her if she says anything. Let's get to work and get out of here. Hurriedly, the men tied Jim's and Bert's ankles. Ed climbed into the wagon. After Ed had cleared an area, Slim picked Bert up and dropped him over into the bed. Ed tied Bert's feet to the staves of the wagon, while Slim picked up Jim and dropped him into the wagon beside Bert. He did not wait to watch Ed tie Jim's feet to the staves, but picked up some jugs and hurried into the mine. Ed soon followed Slim with more jugs. When the 2 men were deep in the mine, Susan left her hiding place and quietly slipped to the mine entrance and looked inside. She could see both men in the light of the lantern, bending over working with the jugs. Cautiously, she crept to the wagon and tried to untie the rough rope that bound Bert to the staves of the wagon. "This one is full," the echoing voice came from the mine. "Those men will be coming out soon," Bert warned Susan. Bert tried to think of what was best for Susan. She was only 5. She had never been far into the woods before, and never alone. Could she find her way back home? If she walked in a straight line in any direction, she would come to a road in time, and from there could find someone who would take her home. However, Bert doubted that Susan would walk in a straight line. She would just wander around and around. To keep her walking in the same direction for any time, she would have to follow the stream. It would take longer, but in the long run, she was sure to get home. "Susan, let the ropes go. You go home now." Bert tried to get some command in his voice, but it was difficult lying on his stomach tied up like a pig. "No, Bert, I'll get you and Jim untied and then you can come with me." "Never mind the ropes," Jim urged frantically. "You go home to your dad." "I don't know the way home," Susan whimpered as she looked fearfully up the valley. "Yes, you do know the way home," Bert tried to reassure Susan. "You just follow the stream down there to the frog pond. Then when you get to the frog pond, go around the pond to the right until you come to another stream. You follow that stream up the hill to the place it comes out of the ground. From there, you cut straight up the mountain till you come to a fence around a cornfield. That cornfield is back of the garden, which is back of our house." "I can't remember all that, Bert." "Oh, yes, you can, Susan," Jim said soothingly. "You just follow the stream back to the pond. Then at the pond, you follow the little stream up the mountain to your house. If you forget, you only have to look at the sun. The sun sets in the west, and your house is west of here. So just go toward the sun." "Go on now, before the men get back," Bert urged. "Tell Dad all about us getting caught. Don't you worry none about us. Dad will take care of us." Susan turned and took a slow step away from the wagon. "If you hear Old Red, go to her. Dad will be wherever Old Red is," Bert added as a last reminder, as he remembered it would soon be milking time, and Old Red would be bawling for her calf. Susan felt happier. Old Red would lead her to Dad. She took another step. Then she heard the clink of jugs. The men were coming back. She ran toward the bushes. Susan was scarcely out of sight, back behind the bushes, where she had hidden before, when the men appeared at the mine entrance with their jugs. Slim set his jugs down beside the wagon, while Ed began wrapping the jugs in rags. "I'll get the wood while you finish up here," Slim said, as he walked over to the wood pile. "You'd better gag those boys while you are about it. Old Mrs. Wilson used to be a McTay, and some of that wood is for her." Ed ripped off 2 pieces from the rag he held and leaned over Bert. When Bert opened his mouth to object, Ed crammed the dirty rag in his mouth. Jim watched as Ed tied another rag around Bert's head to hold the first in place, and was afraid. He was not afraid so much of the men, but he was afraid he was going to cry. He was 2 years older than Bert, and he wished he was as brave as Bert, who had just winked at him as Ed stood up. Slim watched as Ed covered the boys with the same quilt that he covered the jugs. Then he took the driver's seat on the wagon, and with much hemming and hawing, turned the wagon until it headed down the mountain. Slim snapped his whip. The mules strained against their collars. The wagon began bumping down the road and around the mountain. And that's the end of chapter 11.